Remembering John Glenn. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Jackie Borchert, State House reporter for Cleveland.com. Mark Niquette, reporter for Bloomberg News. Bob Clegg, Republican strategist. And Janetta King of Innovation Ohio. America and Ohio have lost a true hero. John Glenn's death brought tributes from around the globe this week. Of course, we know his amazing story. A small-town Ohio kid becomes a fighter pilot, a test pilot, a Mercury 7 astronaut, the first American to orbit the Earth.
Hey, and I feel fine.
After leaving the space program, he served Ohio in the U.S. Senate for 24 years. He ran for president, and after public office, he founded the Glenn School of Public Affairs at Ohio State. For his 95 years on Earth and his hours and then days orbiting it, John Glenn lived the American dream and inspired Americans to dream.
For many, many thousands of years, people had looked up and wondered, they'd been curious about what was up there. Now, we must consider ourselves among the most fortunate of all generations, for we have lived at a time when the dream became a reality.
Mark Niquette, he leaves quite a legacy. When you think about that resume and that life, it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And I thought President Obama had one of the best tributes. Everybody came out with a statement and supporting and recognizing and remembering John Glenn. But he talked about how John Glenn spent his life breaking barriers, you know, whether it was the transcontinental speed record, the space program, obviously, being in the space shuttle, you know, when he was 77 years old, and just, you know, an honorable life as a public servant. I mean, it's you know, we throw around, you know, hero a lot in our, you know, popular culture these days. And, you know, I think it really does apply to John Glenn. When you think about the legacy he leaves behind, you know, touching on so many different areas from, you know, space exploration to, you know, public life in the Senate, and just a life well lived as an honorable, decent American patriot.
He very seldom, I mean, occasionally he would show his emotion, the famous Howard Metzenbaum moment in the 1974 campaign, but he was always very low-key, very, very civil, didn't know real bombast. He would get passionate. He was a fighter pilot, for God's sake. He had to have some fire in the belly. But we didn't see that very often, at least on the public stage.
No. I think that's one of his biggest assets. I mean, he was always just so gracious and patient and really a true example for civility. And, you know, today with partisan politics the way they are, the polarization that we see, it seems like he's almost from a different, you know, he's from a different era. And I think it's a real testament to that aspect of his character when, even in his later years, when he would make public appearances, there would always be a long line of people to greet him, Republicans, Democrats, Independents.
And I think it also speaks to the part of the state and the country where he grew up in his formative years. You know, growing up in Appalachia, you do tend to be a little more humble, and, you know, despite all of his fame, both he and Annie were so approachable and so gracious that, you know, Appalachia is certainly proud of him.
Well, he was a liberal Democrat,
yeah.
You know, but he seemed to cross partisan lines.
Yeah, anytime he ran, he got a ton of Republican support. I mean, he never really had a close race here. You know, they call it the greatest generation for a reason, and I think John Glenn was probably the epitome of that whole generation. I mean, my God, he was a World War II fighter pilot, Korean War fighter pilot, an astronaut, a statesman. They just don't make him like that anymore.
Did you ever campaign against him?
No, I was too smart to do something that stupid.
Well, you know, he was a skillful. He won 4 terms in the U.S. Senate. There has to be a skillful politician there, Mark. And he overcame some resistance from the Ohio Democratic Party. People kind of gloss over that or forget that he wasn't their big choice back in the 70s, late 60s.
Right, and he championed some things that didn't get him a lot of attention. You know, for example, he was always a big advocate for technology and research. I had an interview with him in 2012, and we were talking about, should the United States continue to invest in the space program and space exploration, because it's about the time they were killing the shuttle program,
Yeah.
which he was very unhappy about. And one of the things he said was that he thought America was great because, one, it educated all of its people, and two, it was willing to invest in research and sort of push the boundaries of technology and advancement and discovery, and led to all kinds of advancements in manufacturing and other things that helped the country move forward.
How do we get that? Do we have that same national sense of purpose? I mean, a world war does that. Not that we want that again, but the space race, we don't have that sort of same rallying point that we had during the 50s and 60s.
The country is so different now, and when you view John Glenn, it just creates a stark contrast to what we have now in our country, and especially in politics. It's just a totally different environment, and unfortunately.
I was talking to the head of the Glenn School, the Glenn College at Ohio State, and I asked him if John Glenn had shared any thoughts about the recent campaign. He said, well, he hated the incivility and the back and forth, voted for Hillary, but he says at least that we're not in the War of 1812. So that's what John Glenn told him. It was just like that sense of optimism,
He also had a sense of just being in the moment and doing what had to be done. If you ever get a chance, read the transcript of the Friendship 7 flight, particularly the re-entry, because you can see the back and forth where they tell him essentially, we don't know if your heat shield's going to be on, and we think you can still enter with the retro pack attach, and you just the Glenn saying, well, Roger, understood, and he just goes on to here's the technical things he has to do to get to the re-entry. Yeah. And I asked him once, were you really as cool as you came across in that transcript? And he said, well, no, because the sense he could see things flying by the window. He didn't know if it was the heat shield or the retro pack, but ultimately, his job was to get the spacecraft lined up right and get the reentry right, and panic wasn't an option. And that's sort of how he approached, I think, everything he did.
Interesting. Tonight on WOSU TV on Friday night, if you're watching on Friday night, right after the show, we're going to re-air the WOSU documentary, John Glenn, Life of Service. It's great TV, and it really will, it captures his entire career from rural Ohio all the way to the Glenn School here at Ohio State. Our next topic, lame duck legislators kept everyone hopping this week at the State House. State reps and senators passed a flurry of legislation. The two most controversial bills involve abortion. Lawmakers first approved a bill that would ban abortion after a fetal heartbeat is detected, usually around 6 weeks, before many women realize they are pregnant. The other would ban abortion at 20 weeks, about a month earlier than current law allows. Jackie Borchard, why did the legislature pass two separate abortion bills?
It's a great question, and they're both on their way to John Kasich, and so presumably Kasich will decide in the end, whether one or both or neither become law. But what you saw is two different proposals that were favored by different chambers. The House had passed the heartbeat bill last year in March 2015, and the Senate had said on it they were not interested in moving in it. They had said that it would likely be found unconstitutional, and that's not the way that they wanted to further restrict abortion. They thought that they would then lose and set Ohio back on that issue. And so Senate President Keith Faber said that the election of Donald Trump and the possibility of some more conservative justices joining the U.S. Supreme Court encouraged him to move forward with it. Meanwhile, the Senate had passed a 20-week abortion ban also last year that did not move at all in the other chambers. So I think what we saw here is a little, behind the scenes maneuvering to pass both. So each chamber gets to say that they passed the bill that they preferred, and now it's up to Governor Kasich to decide.
What does he do? I mean, Mark, do we have any indication of whether he'll sign one or both or neither?
Well, he doesn't say in advance at all about what he's going to do, but he has said before, he's had comments that he's been concerned about the constitutionality of the heartbeat bill, the 6-week viability ban. And it's interesting how this was set up sort of as an either-or situation where you could sign a 20-week bill and it looks less onerous than a 6-week bill. And I don't know if that was part of the strategy here, but it is interesting how the legislature did sort of evoke Donald Trump in saying that the conditions are now favorable for at least getting this before the courts.
But Bob, they're really not, because they're going to replace Antonin
Yeah.
Scalia,
Sure.
who was conservative.
Yeah.
Now it would take another vacancy, which is expected in the next probably 5
Yeah.
years or so, but it's not a guarantee. But still they went for the heartbeat bill, which
Yes,
is really
because
ruled unconstitutional.
and I think it is. I mean, I think it's too early for that. I really don't think it's going to pass a court test, which is why they passed the 20-week bill, because that's kind of like the backstop, and that could withstand court scrutiny much, much better. But I agree with you. We aren't there yet, and I don't even know if we'll be there in another 4 years. I don't even know if we're going to be there in another 8 years. It just depends on, turnover in court, who's leaving, who's staying, and we don't really know that right now.
Well, and this 6-week ban is blatantly constitutional. The Ohio right to life doesn't even support it. It's very extreme. But we also shouldn't celebrate the fact that that might not become law when this 20-week ban will, because that is also a very dangerous piece of legislation, inviting legislators into conversations that women and their husbands or partners are having with medical professionals. This is going to have a very practical, real impact on men and women who are making some very hard decisions about their pregnancies.
Jackie, does this politically, what does this mean for the legislature? Does this mean that they're solidly red and far to the right now? Is this a signal? Even the Senate approving the heartbeat bill shows that they are definitely solidly red and almost Tea Party range now.
Well, I think they've been in, you could make an argument they've been in Tea Party range for a while, since the Tea Party was founded. But I think what it shows is this issue has divided even the pro-life community, where Ohio Right to Life has not supported the heartbeat bill. They've tried to go their own route, but you do have some very strong, passionate anti-abortion advocates in the state that have been continuing to push for the heartbeat bill, despite it failing multiple times in the General Assembly before. They've launched massive call and mail campaigns to pressure senators to pass this bill. They've pitted the primary challengers against them. They've taken out advertisements against them. They've been very persistent in their lobbying efforts, and I think by the Senate finally agreeing to pass this, it kind of cools that a little bit for them.
Mike, I don't think it says much about the Senate as a whole as it does about the Senate president. Okay. Because, the Senate president wants to run, Keith Faber wants to run statewide in 2018. And I think that may have had somewhat of a factor in why that ended up passing the Senate.
Helps him in a Republican primary.
Very much so.
Does it backfire, though, Bob, on Republicans in 2018 when they run statewide in a general? Abortion, it's pretty much 50-50
Sure.
statewide.
Sure.
This is not a 50-50 proposition, these bills. So.
Abortion issue in general, I don't think is a game changer in itself, only because I think people on that issue specifically, whatever side they're on, is so into it that they wouldn't be voting for you anyways because of that. I don't think there's many people that are saying, I'm not so sure about abortion.
I think people are paying more attention after this past election. There has been a lot more activism, a lot more online conversations, and so I think overreaches now are going to be brought back in check, especially after the experience of November 8th.
But yet Trump ran on, I'm going to change the Supreme Court, and he won Ohio pretty handily.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see to what extent his election and also the expanded Republican control we've seen in other states around the country, and obviously we have Republican control in Congress now too. To what extent does our Republican leaderships emboldened to pass things that maybe they were trying to pass before but couldn't, or didn't think they would get support either in the Supreme Court or in the federal context? I'm thinking of like right to work type bills in Kentucky, elsewhere. So even beyond Ohio, I think it'd be interesting to see how this plays out in 2017.
And we'll see how Trump is viewed in 2 years as well.
The dictionary defines the word lame as unconvincingly feeble. It defines the word duck as a verb to avoid or evade an unpleasant task. But every 2 years, legislatures at state capitals and in Washington, D.C., in a far from feeble manner, but to avoid the unpleasant task of campaigning immediately after a vote, hold lame duck sessions. They rush meaningful legislation through in a matter of hours, then leave for home or leave for second careers away from elected office. Janetta King, you worked for Governor Strickland. How did you view lame duck sessions?
Well, everybody held their breath in lame duck because you didn't know what was going to come down the pike here. And I think this was a particularly problematic lame duck. In 72 hours, you had many, many bills passed, very extreme pieces of legislation ranging from abortion, as we just talked about, to guns, to energy, to local control, literally in the wee hours of the night. So lame ducks are very problematic, and I also think it showcases another issue we have in Ohio, and that's the issue of gerrymandering. These elected officials feel accountable to no one, feel entitled to be able to do this and go home and continue to get reelected. So I think that there is certainly a lame duck problem, but at the root of our lame duck problem here in Ohio is gerrymandering of districts.
So why don't we do away with lame duck sessions? I mean, it just doesn't seem to make any sense that you've gone to the ballot box, you might be leaving office, and then you're going to pass all these laws that have lasting impact?
Now, Mike, people complain that the legislature, whether it's the state or Congress, does nothing.
Yeah.
At least with lame duck sessions, we get something done, don't we? Now, the quality of the product may be up for question, but they do get them passed.
It's like cramming for a test, right, Mark? You put off studying until the last minute, then you just got to cram it all in.
Well, particularly when you think about the legislature was in session until May, essentially took the rest of the year off until this lame duck to campaign and win their races or whatnot, and like you say, cram everything at the last minute, and just the combination too of technically we have a single subject rule in Ohio, but you look at some of these, they call them Christmas tree bills with all these different topics and issues crammed in. You really wonder, is this the way we should be making laws?
Jackie described the classic Christmas tree bill. I forget where it started, but banning bestiality was on there.
I think technically we had 3 Christmas tree bills this lame duck, and the Constitution, Ohio Constitution says that bills have to stick to a single subject, but that has been interpreted to be a more direction rather than something that's enforced. So they go ahead and they do it, and they find some creative ways though to connect the bills. For example, the Petland bill, which would have it sets standards for where pet stores can buy dogs that they sell, but it also included a section that overrode local ordinances saying otherwise on the matter. Well, that local ordinances part soon became the vehicle for provisions that limited cities' ability to set their own minimum wage and hours for working and benefits and many other things. So, we're in a situation we have a Republican majority in each chamber, so it's very easy for them to tack on a long laundry list of things that they want to get done and pass it, with their majority, and very quickly meet with the Republicans in the other chamber to ensure that it passes over there.
Bob, that's what was odd about this session, is that there was a big rush to pass legislation, but the Republicans are staying in power. There's no change of power in any of the chambers or the executive branch.
Yeah. But, here's the deal. A lot of people think that these are things they're just trying to slip into legislation to get passed so nobody will see it. But no, a lot of this stuff is bills that have been introduced, have gotten hearings, but they just haven't been able to move. So what they do is they take that, they make it an amendment, put it in, and then finally it can get enacted in a quicker manner.
Mark, this can lead to mistakes. We've seen it in the past where there've been, typos or bad language in the way the bill is written is challenged in court, and then it gets tied up for months, if not years.
Right. And the other big complaint is it just rushes the normal process where you would ordinarily have hearings, you could fully vet an issue, get both sides of arguments for and against, accurately presented, so you could make an informed decision on some of these bills. And you're right, sometimes you end up cleaning up after the lame duck for mistakes that are made.
Has anyone ever stopped doing these? Any states stopped doing lame duck sessions? Has there ever been a push to say, let's end the session right before Election Day and come back when we have new members?
Well, most or a lot of states don't even have a session period at this time.
They have part-time legislatures or
Yeah,
whatever.
we're a full-time legislative state, so we're one of, and I think we're in the minority here, that would be in session for a full 2 years anyway. So I would guess most states don't have lame duck sessions.
No push, though, to end the lame duck session here in Ohio. That it's
was
too
a-
fruitful.
There was a bill that was introduced, it had its first hearing last week, and its only hearing. It didn't go anywhere.
That wasn't attached to the Christmas tree?
It was not.
Curiously, no.
Interesting. All right, well, the 2018 race for U.S. Senate has begun, believe it or not, in these waning days of 2016. State Treasurer Josh Mandel, to no one's surprise, this week announced he wants another crack at Sherrod Brown. Mandel's YouTube announcement video uses language that is vaguely familiar.
Most people think Washington is broken, but really, it's just a rigged system. The politicians and their cronies get rich while the middle class struggles.
Okay, Bob Clegg, why is Josh Mandel trying to get Bernie Sanders supporters?
Well, Mike,
Maybe it's Donald Trump. Maybe it's Donald Trump supporters.
Well, you know what? I think he'd like both, and that's why he did that. But I mean, look at it. I mean, Donald Trump won Ohio by almost 500,000 votes, which is the biggest margin that anyone has won Ohio since 1988. So there's something there, and I think it's smart on Josh's part to try to cultivate whatever Trump did to win the state by 500,000 votes. Yeah, he's taking another try at it, but he's got 4 more years in the treasurer's office that he can point to. He's got the public checkbook thing that hundreds of local government entities have signed on to, so that taxpayers can see how their tax dollars are being spent. I mean, he's got some good things he can point to, but I think it's smart on his part to try to take in some of this language. People are still, we've had an election, but people are still frustrated with government, and I think it's smart to try to tap into that.
Go ahead,
He's
Jackie.
been tapping into it as long as Trump has been running for president as well. He was the first Ohio statewide office holder to endorse Trump, and he was he was a Marco Rubio guy, but then when Trump when Kasich and Trump were still in there, he moved over to Trump and was really supportive. So it's not out of character, I think, to kind of borrow from the Trumpism, as it's now being called. And again, no one was surprised, but you also kind of have to say, come on, it's still 2016. Give us a break.
Well, Mark, is he running because he expects a primary? There's going to be a primary in this race, and we expect, with Pat Tiberi being one,
Right.
congressman.
Right. There's expectation that's going to happen. But I think there is a danger coming out this early and being that closely aligned with sort of the Trumpisms we're talking about. We'll see what the climate is like in 2 years when we actually have a primary. And, I think there's a danger, too, of going too far on some particular issues. For example, Josh Mandel was very quick to tweet about the attacks at the Ohio State campus, that this was radical Islamic terrorism. He repeated those comments at a rally for Donald Trump in Cincinnati shortly after that. And while that might play well, and at least it did help, it seemed, Donald Trump in this climate. We'll see if that's going to be a winning play in 2 years.
Janetta, who does Sherrod Brown want to face? Josh Mandel again?
Well, I think that there are some options here with Congressman Tiberi, and he may not be able to raise as much money as Josh Mandel, but I don't think or Senator Brown is afraid of Josh Mandel. Sherrod is very populist in and of itself. I don't think that he's concerned about Josh Mandel being more populist than he is. He can speak to a lot of the voters that Donald Trump in Ohio did end up getting. So I think that, Senator Brown is in a very, very good position. And I also think that with the election of Trump, it's going to be a lot harder for someone to take that Senate seat away from Sherrod Brown.
Well, if there is a primary in this race, Bob, will it really show that the division in the Republican Party between, say, the John Kasich Republicans and the Donald Trump Republicans, and
Sure.
which we saw in
it
past
could
election?
it could line up that way depending on who the candidates are. But not necessarily. I mean, the environment that we were just in was something we've never experienced before politically. I think we need to wait and see what a year and a half from now brings. It could be the same kind of environment, could be totally different again.
A lot will depend on the economy. And John Kasich has some warnings that it's not doing so well, although might just be posturing to avoid tax cuts or hikes or whatever. We'll have to see on that. It's time now for our weekly Off the Record parting shots, and we will start with Janetta King.
So as part of the lame duck, as Jackie pointed out, there were several provisions that took away local power from our cities and villages. And it's just interesting that if the federal government did this to states, I believe the Republicans would be very, very unhappy, but they had no problem doing it to localities in Ohio.
Bob.
We just talked about Sherrod Brown against Josh Mandel for 2018, and the other part of 2018 that's going to be interesting is on the Republican side, all statewide officials are term limited, and it's going to be interesting to see how that musical chairs will work out.
Let the jockeying begin. Mark Niquette.
The tributes for John Glenn continue to pour in, and almost everyone, one of them says it, but Godspeed, John Glenn.
All right. And Jackie.
Well, Thursday was the last scheduled day for the legislature. However, they didn't officially break and end their session. I think they're maybe anticipating a couple vetoes that they may need to override in the next couple weeks.
Okay. This week, WOSU lost one of our leaders. Longtime WOSU TV manager Ed Clay died at the age of 69. Before his retirement for 3 decades, Ed guided WOSU TV and the production of several landmark documentaries like The Birth of Ohio Stadium and The Life of Louis Bromfield. He expanded our programming to 24 hours a day and helped bring us into the digital TV world. We at WOSU remember Ed's great service, and we offer our deepest sympathies to his friends and to his family. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, Twitter, and our website, WOSU.org. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.